Welcome to the 2020 Latino Town Hall. Things look a little bit different now because of the pandemic. This event is taking place on Facebook, and we appreciate your presence here. Today, we have a stellar group of people that are going to talk to us about things happening in the city of Mesa that are important to the Latino community. I'm also joined by my wonderful friend and colleague, Diana Villanueva Salcedo, who is the chair of the Mesa Association of Hispanic Citizens. Thank you, Diana, for being here. You and I have done this for 18 years now, which is totally incredible that we continue to work with our Latino community to offer them workshops on education, health, economic development, and working with our neighborhoods. So why don't you take it away, Deanna, and talk and introduce our panelists.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Luna. And yes, we've been conducting and convening the Mesa Association of Hispanic Citizens, this Mesa Latino Town Hall, for many, many years. We are excited that we're still able to provide some information relevant to our community's needs and concerns via this virtual event. So thank you all for joining us. It's my pleasure to introduce key leaders from the city of Mesa, talking about their outreach efforts and initiatives towards equity and inclusion. So we have joining us this afternoon, Mesa Mayor John Giles, a good friend to our association. We have our Mesa Public School Superintendent, Dr. Andy Forlis. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise this afternoon. Our Mesa Community College Interim President, Dr. Lori Berquam, leading the charge from our colleges. Thank you so much. And of course, our stellar chiefs with the city of Mesa, Mesa Police Chief Ken Cost, a good friend to our events and our association, and our Mesa Fire and Medical Department Chief Mary Cameli. Thank you all so much for joining us today. As we begin to talk about leadership in the city of Mesa, particularly as it relates to our changing demographics, we know that our community has changed over the years. As of the last census, which is now a decade ago, we estimated that Mesa's population was 30% Hispanic. We expect that that will see some changes as a result of the 2020 census, so we'll see what those numbers say. But even from an educational perspective, we know that the population has shifted dramatically, with schools now being Hispanic serving institutions, which is at least 25% of their student body Hispanic, let alone other minority groups included with that. And certainly Mesa Public Schools now being a minority majority district. So as Mesa has changed, if we could talk a little bit about what your organizations are doing to be inclusive and promote equity. Mesa Mayor, we will go ahead and start with you.
Well, thank you, Deanna, and I am delighted to be a part of the Latino Town Hall. This is a legacy event in our community and one that's very important. So thank you to everyone who's tuning in to help us on this ongoing important as important as any issue or cause in our community. The question that we're starting out with is that I just asks us to reflect on the obvious, which is that as our community grows, our Latino community is growing really disproportionately. We're becoming more and more a Latino community and more a younger community. And so certainly the City of Mesa organization needs to be responsive to that. And I think we have been. I'm fond of saying that Mesa needs to be a great place to be a kid. We use that, that's reflected in a lot of the decisions and the priorities that we set as a community. I think people know that we prioritize parks and museums and playgrounds and arts programs, but also, food and housing and transit are all, and healthcare. These are all important issues to being a happy kid as well. Similarly, in acknowledging the reality that we are becoming a more and more Hispanic community, we are being more deliberate in making sure that diversity and inclusion are not a special program, but that they are a part of our DNA, that they are every day and in everything that we do baked in to the priorities of our community as an organization. So I'm looking forward to sharing, during the course of this program, kind of more of the details of what we're doing. I'm very proud of it, but at the same time, certainly acknowledge that as a community and as an organization, we have a long way to go before we get where we want to be. So this will be, again, a daily commitment, but something that is a top priority for the Mesa City government.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your comments about making sure that any sort of diversity, equity, inclusion efforts are part of the system and not seen as a separate initiative. And so certainly we appreciate your leadership around that. Dr. Bergquam, can we talk a little bit about how Mesa Community College, one of the largest educational institutions across the country, let alone here in our own community, how is Mesa Community College responding to these changes, and what do you have underway to provide effective outreach?
Thank you, Deanna, and thank you for, this is my first Latino town hall, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So the first thing that I would say we're most proud of is that we received a $3 million Hispanic Serving Institution grant. And what we hope to do with that grant is actually provide opportunities for our Latinx population, as well as increase our training, increase our ability to serve our Latino population here in the city of Mesa at MCC. We also have our first inaugural Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. And their charge is also to continue to work on hiring a more diverse workforce that reflects our student body, to develop cultural competencies among our staff and faculty, to increase our completion rates, and obviously close the equity gaps that exist right now. We continually work with our Mesa Public School colleagues, with our Mesa Public School advisors that are embedded in the high schools. And I'm proud to say that we also have our diversity, equity, and inclusion as a strategic direction, part of who we are in our mission, vision, and values as a college.
Thank you so much. The fact that that is now a strategic priority for the college really speaks volumes to the commitment to ensure that there really is equity and inclusion for all of our students. So thank you. Thank you also for referencing Mesa Public Schools. We have some fabulous educational partnerships in the city of Mesa, something that we've been consistently proud of. So Dr. Forlis, do you want to give us an update about what's happening with Mesa Schools?
I would love to. And again, thank you for the invitation to be here today, to Deanna and my colleagues. So in Mesa Public Schools, we are committed to the Mesa Public School Promise, which is to ensure that we know our students by name, serve them by strength and need so that they graduate ready for college, career, and community. And that really means that we have to align our resources to best support more opportunities for more of our children, more of the time. And we have a strategic initiative similar to Mesa Community College. A strategic goal that we have that we are embracing this year is our Ensure Equity goal. And with that, we too have formed our inaugural equity task force that is made up of community members, because we know that we cannot do this work by ourselves. We have to learn from one another and share our strengths across organizations. So I think our first big step is making a commitment to a strategic priority. Our next big step has said, we want to get better at this. And so that means that we need to listen and that we need to hear the stories of not only our children, of our employees, but our families, so that we better understand what those needs look like. We have wonderful programs throughout our schools and throughout our district, but we have to take what we know is working and scale it larger to create, again, more opportunities for more people, so that it is part of the system, part of the way that we do work. It's not something that we do when we remember. It needs to be.
Thank you, Dr. Forlis. You know, it's really important. I'm glad that we're sensing a theme here about ensuring that the work is really part of the system and part of an organization's call and mission and structure to ensure equity and opportunity for everyone in our community. So thank you for mentioning that. Our chiefs, you know, you deal with the public on a day-to-day basis, and oftentimes when they're in greatest crisis and in greatest need. So certainly challenging from the outset, let alone putting language differences or cultural differences on top of that. So can you each share a little bit about what your departments are doing to be more responsive in crisis for a changing community? And Chief Cost, I'll go with you first.
Okay, well, thank you. As a regular attendee of the Latino Town Hall, I'm honored to be part of the panel. I've attended a lot of panels, so you're right. It is the best, the most well-attended and always very good. For the police department, for any police department, but especially for the city of Mesa, it's coming up on my 26th year. It's very important that trust and legitimacy is a key and a core value of any police department. And to have that trust and legitimacy from the community, our workforce needs to reflect the community. So I think as far as our diversity goes, we've been on a a really good 6-year recruitment. Over the last 6 years, our academies have been on average well over 40% diverse. To break that down in numbers for you, our Hispanic applicants and recruits that graduate from the academy is almost at 26% over the past 6 years. Our African-American recruits are about 4.8%, which is higher than our population average. Of course, we'll get the 2020 numbers. And then females, our profession only has about 11% female officers, and we've recruited over 17, almost 18% female officers over that 6-year period. And the reason why that's important, obviously, is that's our future. And we're just building. You talked about, we talked earlier about, is that a systemic portion of your department? Yeah, that's built into our strategic plan, our strategic initiative moving forward. And you have 3 of the 4 executives, including myself, who all rotated through the human resource area in a command staff position that were part of those recruitments over the past 6 years. So you have very dedicated people within our 4 walls that are doing that. But for us, it doesn't stop at just recruiting the officers that are working the street. It's who our leadership is down the road, and succession planning and giving opportunities to our diverse candidates that we're hiring. And we just got done with a sergeant process. So that's our first line supervisors. And of our 8 promotees that are coming up, we've had a 50% diversity hire rate or promotion rate for those sergeants. And they're our future. Those are the future lieutenants, commanders, assistant chiefs. As our community grows, our staff and our leadership will grow as well.
Thank you, Chief Cost. I know that from a community perspective, you've taken a lot of heat around how the department reflects the community, and you have been able to demonstrate measurable improvement and tracking those numbers. And I know that that has been a huge lift for you and your department. So those efforts are truly appreciated. And the fact that you can now report out on some great numbers is just really heartening and inspiring. So thank you. Chief Cameli from Mesa Fire and Medical, again, dealing with people oftentimes in the worst of situations. So tell us a little bit about what's going on with your staff and department. We're going to ask you to unmute first.
That's usually very helpful. I appreciate that. We're very similar to PD in the regard that we want the public to trust us, and everything we do, we want to make sure that there's trust. And starting with our membership, who's on our group, who's on our team, and similar to PD's over the last 6 years since 2016, our numbers in diversity have been increasing. We were about 30 to 35% in 2016, and I'm proud to say we've gone up each year. In our current academy right now, it's 38% diversity. We're not quite as high as PD, but we are getting better and better in terms of our numbers going up. And our whole thing is to try and get members to put in, just diverse members to even apply. So we've been working, we're always open to ideas. We met with Mock a few months ago on this to come up with better ways to reach out and to really be transparent in the community, to invite so people want to be part of our group. Something else that we're finding is, so having a 38% diverse academy today is showing that we are really, our numbers are increasing. But also what's important is in our leadership group, we think even as we pick our leaders, like in our last few assistant chief panels, we've invited Mock to be present. I want a diverse panel to make the selections with us to see, because I want a good spectrum from the community to also be involved in those decisions. So we continue to do that. We'll be doing that in our next process. And I think just being open and engaged like that as we go through the starting of a career into how it impacts our response out in the field is something that's important to us, and the public trust is what we value most.
Thank you. Again, being able to provide some heart. Yes.
Yeah, let me jump in here real quick, but I was gonna switch over to the mayor if that's okay. Thank you, Chief Cameli, for all you do for the city of Mesa. We appreciate all the hard work you do. But we're gonna come back to you. So I was gonna go back to the mayor. One of the things, obviously, we've been affected by the pandemic here in the city of Mesa. Latinos and communities of colors have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Many businesses have closed, as well as many have been evicted and haven't been able to pay their mortgage. But the city of Mesa, through the Mesa Cares program, has provided many opportunities for our communities of color. And I was wondering if the mayor would speak on our efforts as a city to assist our communities of color, specifically our Latino community.
Thank you, David. I would appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. Mesa is fortunate in that we are one of the largest cities in the United States. We're well over 500,000 people. That allowed us to be one of the 35 communities that got direct funding, from the federal government. So at the beginning of this challenge, we had the wonderful challenge / blessing of having $90 million deposited into our checking account. And so that creates a real stewardship on our part, to be wise users of those very important funds. And I'm proud of the way that our organization has responded to that challenge. And as you indicated, so as a result of that, we've had the resources to go out and have a real impactful response, to our community. And as you indicate, people of color were, not just in Mesa, but everywhere, have been disproportionately impacted by the challenges of COVID. The first thing we did was to survey our community to find out what are the most pressing needs. And what you may recall, back in March and April, people were panicked about the basic necessities of life. This is back when the grocery store shelves were empty and you couldn't, you couldn't buy a roll of toilet paper for $1 million. And people were just, and I don't mean to make light of it. It's just people were they were shaken to their core, as to how we're going to weather this storm. So we immediately shifted the money that I was just talking about. We became partners with food banks, and the Mesa Convention Center became a food warehouse. And we very quickly got really good at helping to bring your car by, the Mesa City Center, tap your brakes, and we'll fill your trunk with 50 pounds of food. But also, we did a lot when it comes to helping the business community. And the small business grants that we provided for folks that were left out of the PPP and other federal programs, those went disproportionately. We targeted those, particularly to the communities of color, because a lot of those are very small businesses that are maybe a little less sophisticated and are underbanked and are facing challenges that some of the more sophisticated, larger businesses don't have. So we were able to shift millions of dollars into those small businesses that needed them. And like I say, I'm proud of the way that the Mesa Cares, that we've administered the Mesa Cares funds. And I think that our community, particularly people of color in our community, have been blessed by that.
Thank you so much. I know that Councilmember Luna, thank you for bringing up that point. Our communities of color across the country have really been disproportionately impacted. So the fact that you were able to shift resources in a quick way to be responsive to that is really admirable. Keeping the focus on you real quick, Mayor Giles, we referenced earlier how population shifts, especially with our youngest generation, are really can be seen quite significantly, especially with our Mesa schools and Mesa Community College. You have been a champion of education throughout your tenure. Can you talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that you have led the charge on to support education and ensure that we have equity and access for all of our Mesa kids?
Well, thank you. And yes, education is a huge part of what we do as a community. And sometimes I have to remind myself that to kind of take a step back and to let the educators be in charge of education in the city of Mesa, because I do have a lot of enthusiasm on the topic. And our role is, we are not an education organization, but we are, our goal is to be very, very good partners to the education institutions, the Mesa Public Schools, Mesa Community College, and the other great education providers that we have. So we have prioritized, one of Andy's predecessors, Mike Cowan, several years ago when I started this job, said to me, "Poverty is doing very well in Mesa, Arizona," and that was a sobering, challenge to hear from one of your community. So we have tried to realign our priorities as a community, and so some of the things we're doing is the Mesa K-Ready program to try to increase the amount of early learning and preschool that we have going on. The Mesa College Promise, that we're great partners with Dr. Berkwin on. Very excited that the next fall we'll see, we'll be able to deliver on this promise that if you're a Mesa high school kid, don't worry, we'll get you 2 years of a Mesa Community College education. The ongoing invitation we have to other institutions of higher learning, our partnership with ASU and others to increase our higher education attainment levels in the city of Mesa. And then back to that $90 million blessing that we received back in March, we were delighted that we were able to work with Dr. Forlis and the other elementary school districts in the city to make sure that every elementary school kid in Mesa has a distance learning device, a laptop. Because there's so many families in our community that when you shift to an online curriculum, you exclude them from having a public education for their family. So that's kind of some of the highlights. But again, we're not in the education business. These other great people on the Brady Bunch screen here are the educators. But we're anxious to do everything we can. We realize how important it is for the prosperity of our community to support those organizations.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a good segue. We're going to jump on to ask Andy to do a follow-up, as well as Lori Berkman, to talk about some of the remote learning challenges that you faced. Let's talk about the K-12 setting, and then we can go into MCC and their efforts to ensure that our students get educated. We'll start with you, Andy.
Thank you very much, Councilman Luna. Remote learning has its blessings and curses depending on the situation that we're in. I think that we have to think about this large picture of public education. And we know that public education was designed in its very beginnings. It was not designed for all children. And we continue to push the rock uphill to make sure that education is attainable and accessible for all children. So now we move into a world of this pandemic where we have taken public education, we've digitized it, we've put it into the homes of America and asked parents to be the teachers. That provides challenges in itself because our families have many critical functions that they need to be doing to keep their families alive and well, and now adding education onto that is something that is a burden in some homes. But added to that is we need to make sure that our kids, and we are so grateful for the partnership and the investment of the city to provide those those digital devices for our elementary children. We also need to make sure that they have safe, reliable, and sustainable internet access, and that they are able to access that curriculum when they are in remote learning. So some of the challenges that we have faced have been supervision of children when they are home alone, and also making sure that they log in and stay engaged. It's easy to log in and say, here, I'm present, turn the camera off and go run and go play. So making sure that we are using instructional strategies that keep our kids motivated and keep them engaged in the work that we're doing has been one of our challenges. And then also making sure that we're staying in touch with our families to make sure that they have what they need. When they come into our school buildings, it's a lot easier to have the conversation or to do a quick assessment to say, you look really sleepy right now, or you're squinting your eyes. Let's make sure that you get your eyes checked. Or you're pulling on your ear, let's get you to the nurse and make sure that you've got, let's see if you've got an ear infection that's bothering you. Much harder to do that in a remote environment. So some of our typical practices we're having to rethink. How do we attend to all of the needs of our children, not just to those academic needs, because we know how important that is.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Andy. I know that we've had some broadband issues in some of our communities, particularly when we talk about our communities of color, many of our Latino communities. When we were making the decision about allocating the funding for the computers, we were looking at Title I schools. We know many Latino students attend those schools, as well as many others that fall under the low-income bracket. So thank you for what you're doing. And then Deanna, I'm going to toss it over to you. And if you want to go ahead and ask Lori to talk about what's going on at Mesa Community College.
Absolutely. I know our college students, people I think assume the youngest generation is very tech savvy, and that isn't necessarily the case for every single student. And so I know that there's a number of challenges with online learning, remote learning at the college level as well. So Lori, do you want to talk a little bit about response to COVID and how the college has shifted its services?
Absolutely. Thank you, Deanna. And we also provided devices to those who needed them. And I would say one of our biggest lifts was actually transitioning in the middle of the semester last year. Many of our faculty, when you talk about young people being tech savvy, Many of our faculty had to learn, how am I going to teach online? How am I going to teach this, be engaged and keep the learners engaged? So I would say that there was lots of learning happening, and you could probably feel it, the buzz. I really appreciate the partnership with Mayor Giles regarding an interaction with the City of Mesa and the National League of Cities to improve internet access throughout the city. That is probably the number one thing we heard from our students, aside from maybe I'm tired of being remote and I'm tired of learning online and I want to get into a classroom again and I want to, be in contact with my faculty member other than via a computer. But improving that access is certainly an important infrastructure component that we have to focus on. We too did drive-through food, we call it the Mesa Market, so students can drive through and safely pick up some foodstuffs for them to help manage their day-to-day as well. We have offered numerous grants to students who found themselves without a job or losing a job and they needed to pay the rent or to take care of a car or automobile bill or something to that effect, that we were able to use some of our development funds and crisis funds to assist students in that way. But overall, I would say the biggest impact that we have seen is certainly the need and the desire for people to want to have that face-to-face interaction. And it's not something that we can substitute. This is a poor substitute. Love it, we're doing great. Love this forum, would rather be in person with folks. And I think that's also what many of our students are saying, are feeling and expressing. That said, I want to remind all of you watching this, MCC is a great place to take a class or two. We are challenged to think about how we might do our curriculum slightly differently. So instead of a 16-week class, maybe we need to think about an 8-week class or even a 4-week class. So we're challenging ourselves as well, but please join us. We'd love to have you. Thank you, Deanna.
No, thank you, Dr. Berkwan. That was a huge shift. And certainly we have to remind ourselves that educators had to learn new technology and new techniques along with all of our kids and families. So that was a great reminder. One of the things we keep hearing nationally is that the impacts of COVID have really revealed what have been some longstanding inequities, not just in education, but across all large systems. So when we think about inequities in terms of maybe access or language or whatever the case may be, how are each of your departments, your systems responding to some of these inequities that have surfaced? I know Mayor Giles, we'll toss it back to you. You have really stepped up efforts around putting together a diversity plan and staffing behind it. Do you want to reference some of those? And then we'll turn back to our chiefs to hear some of your input as well.
Yes, thank you. I think we have made some meaningful progress on this area recently, and I give the credit for that to you, Deanna, and to Councilmember Luna, as being really two of the pot stirrers, to hold our fire and to help us do what's right. So thank you, for your encouragement in doing what should have been done long ago. But yes, some breaking news at the City of Mesa. I'm glad to report that we do have a very highly qualified diversity administrator now whose office is outside the door of mine and reports directly to our city. What is he, David? Our city manager. And we have and she's been very busy. We have a diversity and inclusion action plan that she has spoken with many of you already about and got your critique of. And that document's been vetted. It has very achievable but identifiable metrics attached to it. And so going forward, that's a document that's going to help us to not just be aspirational and say, yes, we want to do good things, but to be able to tell if we are actually making progress and doing what we want to again, make the progress that's so sorely needed on this topic. So yeah, I think we have a renewed commitment to doing this and to, again, making this part of who we are going forward, and to institutionalize it so that, when the Deannas and the Davids, aren't there to prod us that we're doing the right thing, just as part of our day-to-day operations.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Chief Koss, would you speak to the issues related to equity in the city of Mesa Police Department? And I know that you and I have had conversations as it relates to diversity training, as well as training some of our officers when they are engaging with our Latino community.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the diversity of our ranks, but really, when we talk about dealing with the inequities in the community, it's a boots on the ground type of approach. It's really getting our officers on the ground to deal with our Latino communities. And as I sit here in the Brady Bunch group, and we're talking about this, and I'm kind of going over the different things that we do. It's with everybody in the room, whether it's our officers, our youth development officers that are part of our community engagement division, a division that's dedicated to the community, going to whether it's Keno Junior High and helping hand out thousands of food boxes to our kids, and being out there and meeting those kids, to helping the teachers pass out laptops, to currently working at Lowell Elementary with our officers, and we're setting up a Shop with Officers program to help within the community as the Latino community specifically as we approach the holidays, is getting our officers face to face with our communities that are challenged and our Latino communities. We have programs that we're standing up right now with our youth development folks. We have an officer, you have to meet her if you haven't, Cindy Martinez, who on her own reached out to USA Soccer and had a USA Soccer instructor come and teach several of our officers the fine points of soccer. They were already interested or they played, but now they literally had a coaching clinic. I went out and did like a little kickoff on that. They spent all day doing a coaching clinic so they can in turn coach kids in our Latino community and have teams and put them through an entire year. It takes a police athletic league to another level when our officers are doing that from the ground up. So it's really that boots on the ground, that approach that really establishes a culture within our officers and the community to have them engage and forever be a part of what we do.
Why don't you speak to us about your training? I know we had talked about how you're training your officers when they begin to engage with Latino community relative to language and understanding the culture.
Yeah, the language barrier is obviously always a challenge. I had our Spanish program for years, and I'm proud to say that we've grown the amount of Spanish speakers that we have within the organization. Having some folks that never even spoke the language and putting them through immersion and really getting them to the point where they feel comfortable. And then just the cultural and diversity training that we do in the academy. We are bound to do just, say it's 10 hours of diversity training in the academy for the state. We've tripled that within our academy because we run our own academy. So we really teach our officers the culture and the community that they're going out into, so they understand as a young recruit, and then in-service training, really get an understanding of what our community is all about. So when they do engage, they understand the cultural differences. They understand their own. We have, bias training, implicit bias training that all of our officers go through. And then we double down with the officers out in the field for them to understand what they're bringing into the profession. And then that day-to-day contact, treating people with dignity, respect, empathy, really having that well-rounded training approach that we do, not just in the academy, but our ongoing training every year, which we have every year.
Thank you, Chief. I also want to give a shout out to Tara Hall and Minnie Salas and their efforts working with all our communities. I know they've done some tremendous work with the Latino community, and I appreciate all that you've done. So I'm going to toss it over to Chief Cameli if she would speak to issues related to equity and diversity in the fire department. Talk to me about some of the programs that you've implemented.
First, I think we're gonna have to start taking soccer so we can start playing soccer in the field, and then we'll have little competitions. How about that, Chief Cost?
We always like to compete with you.
Yes, true. Very true. we've got a lot going on. We have reignited, we had a Bombero group that was very, very active for a long time. And about a year ago, we've reignited that and starting to really advance with the Bomberos, getting them involved in our recruitments, getting involved in our training to really kind of get it like Chief Cross said, the boots on the ground. Our mission statement in the fire department is to serve with care. And that's compassion, accountability, respect, and excellence. And the expectation is to do that with every person, every time, on every call. And that's really our goal. And that's the core of who we are when we're out in the community. And we will continue to do that. We have diversity training, bias, systemic racism, all those, the bias training. We have that lined up for January for our leadership. And also we have many Spanish speakers on our job. Some are basic and some are more advanced. But we're in the process of trying to find, we had, for years, we had someone that did emergency Spanish training, just so on the calls, we would be able to communicate with folks that do not speak English. And so we're in the process of trying to reignite that program again to do, it's like a 10, 12-week program, just so we can learn the emergency Spanish, so we can get through critical situations and have that knowledge. We're always looking at ways to improve and continue to do that, to be engaged in the community and to apply as many different diverse aspects of our job in the community so we can relate to who we respond on every day.
Thank you, Chief Cameli. I think Chief Cost is going to take you up on that soccer playoff, if you will. I'll be anxious to watch that. So thank you for that. I did want to mention that the Bomberos are actually helping us at Jefferson Elementary School December 11th. And so we appreciate, as well as the entire Mesa Fire Department, Biomedical Department, and the Mesa Police Department. So thank you for that. So I'm going to toss it over to Deanna. She's got some very important questions that she'd like our educators.
When we talk about inequities, one of the things that I think come up in education quite a bit are educational inequities. And if we disaggregate the data, how well are all of our students doing, but how well are some of our subgroups doing? So when we take a look at a deeper dive in terms of student achievement and student health and really taking into consideration the entire well-being of our students, what does that look like for different populations? Andy, we'll start with you, but from the institutional perspective, how are you and Mesa Public Schools addressing some of those inequities?
I think that as educational inequities are an adult problem, not a kid problem. And our kids don't see those inequities until they're presented to them. And so one of the first steps that we did about 4 years ago in Mesa Public Schools was started culturally responsive teaching and a focus on what does it mean to be teaching in a culturally responsive way. And that's really a strategy of inclusion. And so does the curriculum look like and sound like children? Can children see themselves in what they're learning? Does it make sense to them? Does it fit into their context of the world that they're living in? Are the examples that we're using inviting and making them see themselves in that learning process? So that was one small step forward. This year, we are focusing on all of our staff building a common understanding and shared language of what does equity mean? What are those terms of equity? Whether it's racial inequity or gender inequity or inequities of just access to all opportunities. So it's important to raise the conversation and to start the conversation and create safe places for it. But this is happening within the adults throughout our organization. I'm also proud to say that we have members that regularly apply to be a part of the Hispanic Leadership Institute and broadening their awareness. The facilitator for that Hispanic Leadership Institute is one of our principals. And I think that is incredibly important that we put that our adults are putting themselves in vulnerable positions to look through the lens of others. And I think that is our steps towards inclusion. We need to get better. It needs to be broader. We have to create systems around that. But those are our small steps. When we think about educational inequities that the question focuses on, oftentimes our families of color don't know how to approach the educational institution. And so during the pandemic, we created the very bright red help button on all of our websites. Whether it's help or ayuda, we want to make sure that there is one place to hit one button to say, I need help. And that is a way for us to help our families to navigate, to get what they need to close some of those inequities. As you said earlier, we could go on forever about this, but I don't want to take all of the airtime. So I will pass that back to you, Deanna, and I'm sure I'll have opportunity to loop back.
Thank you.
Of
Thank you
course.
for mentioning the Hispanic Leadership Institute East Valley, administered through Valle del Sol, one of our community's fabulous nonprofits. The East Valley cohort is now going to be starting, I think it's 11th cohort. And all of the folks on the screen have participated as panelists and have supported their employees going through the program. So again, another great example of collaboration. Thanks for bringing that up, Andy.
Absolutely.
Lori, thank you. Lori, what about inequities from a college perspective? I know something that's been discussed at the national level. So how are we looking at that here in Mesa?
Well, first, we're building awareness and looking at the data so that we can actually tell the story of what exists at MCC. So that would be first, is building that awareness and that understanding of what that means and having conversations about what that looks like then in the classroom and how that's experienced by our students. And actually hearing from our students their experiences and what they need. As you know, as a district across Maricopa, we are employing guided pathways, which is just-in-time services, wraparound support. So in a class, if a student says, hey, I'm struggling, we have tutoring available, we have wraparound support. Students come in and they have one advisor. They're not, running through different advisors. They have one advisor that then someone like Deanna can say, hey, Lori, I'm struggling here. Where can I get some support? Or I'm lost my job, I need this. Because it's not just inequities in the classroom, although those are certainly apparent, but we know that there's all sorts of dynamics and factors that figure into how a student learns in the classroom. So awareness is number one, building systems of support are number two, and then making sure that we're communicating with each other and how to support our students, particularly our Latino or Latinx students.
Thank you for that, Lori. Really appreciate it. And you hit it on the head. So many of our students struggle with life issues, let alone academic issues. And so that can really combine to put some stress on our young people looking to complete.
Could I add one thing to that?
Absolutely.
We actually have talked a lot about emotional wellness and support services for many of our students who may be struggling and not have anybody to talk with or not know who to talk with. As we know, in the city of Mesa, suicide is a problem, and it's something that we continually talk about, and the pandemic has only amplified that particular problem. And so as a district, we're also contracting with support services to be able to help our students who may need somebody to talk with. Maybe it's a counselor, maybe it's an advisor, maybe it's just a friendly ear, but how do we provide that in time of need for our students is definitely something we're also working on providing.
That is a huge, huge lift. And we know the stress during the pandemic has really exacerbated some longstanding issues. So again, thank you for your efforts in that. So our time is flying by. We're almost here at the end. Councilmember Luna, let's move to our final question.
All righty, let's get the mayor. We're going to get him on the hot seat. Hey, Mayor, talk to us about your strengths, points of pride that you may have not mentioned during this discussion. And what's the biggest challenge for equity to move forward in the city of Mesa?
Well, thanks. Again, we're very proud of this diversity and inclusion action plan and elevating, the diversity administrator position in our community that I already mentioned, but something that Dr. Burko mentioned a moment ago, I haven't touched on yet, and that's supporting internal support, for our employees, and we have some great employee affinity groups in the city of Mesa that whose mission is to provide, peer encouragement and help us with recruitment, particularly among our communities of color that exist in our employee groups. Also, I haven't mentioned yet, I think on the communications front, I think we're really made some great progress with things like Mesa en Español, the Facebook page, and we've got some great Spanish language efforts that are going on that David, you and have been, integral in launching in our community. So those are a couple of things that I hadn't mentioned yet, but again, I just want to compliment everyone here and tell you that we are excited to be a part of this team and moving the ball forward on this important topic.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we do have the Mesa Hispanic Network, which has been instrumental in working with many of our Latino workers throughout the city of Mesa. So we appreciate them as well. And so we're going to go ahead and continue on with the same question. And I guess that would go to, we're going to start with Andy, all right? We're going to start with the educators and then move on to public safety. So Andy, do I need to repeat the question or do you have that?
I got it. So a great point of pride, I'm going to echo a bit of what the mayor says. A point of pride is taking some giant leaps forward in ensuring that we have accessible language for our Hispanic community, making sure that we have translation, making sure we have our Facebook in Espanol as well. We do a Facebook Live event every Wednesday evening at 4 o'clock in Espanol and in English. That's the first time we've ever done that. So that's taking some steps forward. But I think when you ask about that big challenge of educational inequities, I think the challenge is mindset. We have to set a mindset that all kids, all of our kids deserve high levels of learning, and that we all have to deliver to that high expectation. And instead of what we've done for many years in education is we lower the standard instead of maintaining a high standard and increasing the levels of those wraparound services and support. So when we can change our mindset that it's what changes is the support, not the rigor of the standard or the expectation. I think that is something that is going to take our educational institution forward. And I know that Dr. Berquam would be very happy when she sees the K-12 system get our arms around that. It will change how she has to provide resources in higher education. And I know that our workforce is asking us to do that. So all kids, every single one of our kids deserve opportunity for a rigorous education with whatever the support they need to get there.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, Dr. Berkman.
Well, first I want to say, I think one of our points of pride is the resilience we're seeing in the community. And if we don't talk about resilience, we're missing our opportunities. So resilience is really important. Point of pride for us at MCC is certainly our commitment to student success. And as Dr. Forlis just mentioned, our wraparound services and being able to provide them for our students. But I will also say a bonus for us is our opportunity to engage with the community. So if you haven't been COVID tested, you could do that at MCC, drive through. You could get your flu shot at the same time. We had a voting location. You should have seen the amazing turnout at the colleges for our voting. So all of those amidst a pandemic, we need to talk about how we have to celebrate what we are doing well. And I want to personally say a point of pride is that MCC, the community college, is in this community of Mesa. And I invite all of you watching to take a class with us, to learn, to continue to learn, because that's what makes life exciting. And I hope we're a place where everybody feels like they are welcome. We'll continue to work on that. We have miles to go before we sleep, if I quote a famous poet. But we're going to keep at it, and we're going to do it in partnership with you. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me to my first, but certainly not my last Latino Town Hall.
Thank you, Dr. Bergman. Okay, Chief Cameli, what's points of pride? What are you most proud of, and what are some of the challenges in terms of equity moving forward?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the point of pride for us is really to serve our community. That's why we're there, and that's what we're all about, is to do the best we can in that. Also, when you talk about growth mindset, when we're talking about, Dr. Forlis said it, it's in adults too. And when we're talking about inclusion and diversity, we as adults are learning every day. And our goal here is to continue educating on that, continue educating on what it is we need to know to make it sure we're including everybody in our decisions and in our departments. And we will continue with that. And as a department, that's our commitment, that's our goal. We have an academy class graduating next week, and they give themselves titles. This one I just learned is Los Luchaderos de Fuego. So they're already setting the way. That's what they're calling themselves this year. So we're on the road. We're on the path to continue being open and transparent as we move forward, and that's our goal, and that's our commitment.
Wonderful, Luchadores de Fuego. I love that.
Yep.
Great. All right, Chief Cas, talk to us about your points of pride. What are you most proud of? And talk about challenges in terms of equity moving forward?
Well, I'm proud of so much, and I'll echo what Chief Cameli said. I mean, I'm proud to serve the citizens of Mesa. As I look out to the camera and those citizens that are out in the community, you've supported us through quite a challenging time. I mean, not just as a country, as a, a planet, but the challenging times that we've had in law enforcement as well. And we feel that support, but we have to earn that. And I'm really inspired, and I think part of our strength is our training and the fact that we have so many recruits that are still willing to come into such a difficult profession. They really embody servant leadership, and that's what we need more of moving forward to really enhance our community. And I'll end with what our biggest challenge is for equity. It's sustainability. I believe that we really need to have a commitment of sustainability, that those are actions on things that we're committed to, and we can never lose that momentum, and we can never feel like we've reached the finish line. So I know for us, we'll always be hungry to do more within our organization and for our community. So sustainability is a big part of that.
Thank you, Chief. Now we're going to toss it over to Deanna, who's going to do a wrap up and talk about some themes that emerged from this conversation.
So thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your time, your insights, your expertise, and being open about challenges that are confronting all of us in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as our mayor has said many, many times, it's really going to take a community response to address a lot of the issues that our community is facing. So the fact that we have all of our leaders here together is great. A couple of common themes and hopefully opportunities for collaboration moving forward. So it sounds like our three primary institutions, the City of Mesa, Mesa Community College, Mesa Public Schools, all embarking on really strategic priorities around equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and putting some action plans behind what that means for us. Certainly, I think that's an opportunity to collaborate, and hopefully our three key public institutions develop some common threads in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion work moving forward. It would be a lost opportunity for everyone to act in silos. And so how can we make sure that we're offering a collective response to equity, and how do we roll our community members into that? So we want to celebrate the accomplishments to date, and we want to challenge ourselves moving forward. How do we ensure that, to the Chief's point, that this is a sustainable effort and it becomes part of our system, part of our organization, part of our DNA, and not something seen as a separate endeavor? So thank you again. And Councilmember Luna, I'll turn it over to you for a wrap up.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Deanna, for coming up with this great idea. There are some silver linings when we think about the pandemic. We can actually get together, maybe not in person, but via Zoom and via Facebook to provide some great information for our community. Let's do more of these. I think this is important that we continue to work with our community, to continue to engage with our community and provide them some really, really important information that would benefit them. So thank you so much, Deanna. Deanna is the chair of the Mesa Hispanic, I always get that wrong, Mesa Association of Hispanic Citizens, and I've been in that group for many, many years. And I just say mock. It's a lot easier. But I do want to thank our panelists. First of all, my good friend, Mayor John Giles, thank you so much for being part of this wonderful conversation. And it's an honor to work with you. I also want to thank Police Chief Ken Cost, also Fire Medical Chief Mary Cameli, MPS Superintendent Andy Forlis, and MTC Interim President Lori Berquam. Thank you so much for what you do for our community, your participation. I hope that you continue to get engaged. Deanna has given you a challenge. Let's take her up on that challenge and move forward. So on behalf of the City of Mesa and my guests, thank you for joining us today. Have a great evening.
Thank you.